Judd Legum, writing at Popular Information, wants us to know something I talked about during the weekend. And Judd wants us to know that over the weekend, Trump's pet ape, JD Vance, was a featured speaker at a conference. It's called the Courage Tour. Courage Tour. Hosted by this insane fucker named Lance Wallnau. Now, Wallnau claims to be a preacher, and he also claims that God, they all claim this, God took him aside and had a chat with him and said, God said this to Lance Wallnau, God himself, the hairy thunderer, the cosmic hoo-ha, God said to Lance Wallnau, quote, Kamala Harris was the one the devil was going to use to push through the White House. I've had a vision from the Lord that a Harris presidency is how the devil intends to bring in the destruction of this country. End quote. I mean, what the fuck kind of madness is this? Well, it's Christian madness, religious madness. This is what happens when these psychotic fuckers who claim they have conversations with this invisible being. If that's not schizophrenia, what is? Somebody once said praying to a divine being or talking to a divine being is prayer. When the divine being talks to you, it's called schizophrenia. Well, here we are. Now, at this, during his Courage Tour, this crazy fuck Lance Wallnau said that God is making an effort to stop Kamala Harris and the devil, who apparently are working together now. Kamala Harris and this sick bastard Lance Wallnau's devil. They're working together. Oh, yes, they are. And at this conference where Trump's pet ape gave a speech, Wallnau described himself as a, quote, I'm a Christian patriot, not a Christian nationalist, because that term Christian nationalist was contrived by the left to create a negative brand image. End quote. You rotten bastard. It's just astonishing, isn't it? During the conference, the one where Trump's pet ape spoke, Wallnau used Christian nationalism and Christian patriotism interchangeably. And in 2021, in a Facebook video, this psycho, Lance Wallnau, said, yes, I'm a Christian nationalist. I will take the flag that God gave us with his blessed freedom and blessed government and blessed nation, and I will take that flag and lead them to the cross. What? That's right. He wants to lead people to an instrument of torture. Understand that. They're not talking about redemption. They're not talking about peace and love and freedom and joy and happiness and honesty and morality. They're talking about taking people to an instrument of torture. I'm going to take people to the cross and then we're going to wash them in the blood. What the fuck? And millions of people in this country still worship at that goddamn message of psychosis. 3 years ago, this crazy bastard Wallnau described his plan to use Jesus to restore Trump to power after he was kicked to the curb in 2020. Yep, Wallnau was going to use Jesus. Of course they are. This is my whole fucking point, and it has been for a number of years now. These Christian devils, they don't give a fuck about Jesus or Mary or the baby manger in the manger or any of that shit. They use this as an instrument of torture and death, this religion. But 3 years ago, this is what Wallnau said as he was trying to describe his plan. He was going to use Jesus. He said, quote, if we can get the gospel to the rallies in the name of Jesus, I'm praying that Donald Trump will entertain this idea, because when those 30 million low-hanging fruit souls come to Jesus, that love America and realize without a move to God, without an awakening, without divine intervention, we're sunk because we're up against the beast that is far better entrenched into the high places than we are. And if we can get that 30 million out there, if we can get 20 million out there, my God, do you have any idea how that will shift permanently the political landscape of America? End quote. Now, when I didn't read this or hear this when he originally said it 3 years ago. But I've become familiar with this psycho's, the schizophrenic's words of late. And when I read these words, I thought, Jesus Christ, Malloy, that's what you've been saying. Yeah. How many times have I said this? If we could get 30 million people in the streets of America to just sit down and say, now this is during the Trump era, just sit down and say, enough of this shit. We're not going to put up with this anymore. Then the machinations of fascism in this country would have to come to a stop, or there would have to be an outturning of thousands of troops to start executing all of us. So I guess in a sense, I have a view, while it's on the other side of the coin completely from this crazy schizophrenic, I've shared a view based on my experience in rallies and how they work and how they don't work, that almost follows along the same lines as Lance Wallnau's, although Wallnau's version of this is a parody of the idea of people changing things by showing their support for truth and justice and decency and love and kindness and patriotism. No. What Wallnau is talking about is 30 million people showing their support for rotten, filthy, murderous fascism. This is what he wants. This is what Trump wants. This is what Stephen Miller wants, and Steve Bannon, and all of these Christian and a handful of Jewish Nazis who are working hand in glove with Donald Trump to destroy the country. Now, the strategy of getting all these Christians to rise up and start slaughtering non-Christians, which is what he's ultimately talking about, is all put together in this so-called courage tour. See, Wallnau wants other people to have the courage, that's what he calls it, to maim, hurt, poison, and kill people who don't agree with Nazism. This is what Trump talked about this weekend at his rally. We just need one night of real strong violence. So in a presentation shortly before the Trump's pet spoke, Trump's pet ape, Wallnau said that America is faced with a choice between a satanic agenda channeled through Democrats, and the other choice is embracing Christianity through Trump. Whew. I mean, again, every black person in America is familiar with this kind of language because they have been the victims of it. Over and over again, every Jew in America is familiar with this kind of language because their ancestors have been the victim of it for hundreds of years. We know about this. Or we should. And I think about the tens of millions of people who, well, I like Donald Trump because, he'll keep the colors out of our country and he'll give everybody a good job. Come on, what the fuck? Anarchy and a satanic agenda, or Christianity and Trump's leadership. Now, that was the theme, according to Popular Information, Judd Legum, where I'm getting this information. That was the theme all weekend at this Courage Tour. On Friday, another one of these Christian Nazis, a guy named Bill Federer, said, quote, "The left is pursuing a satanic theocracy." These fuckers just love Satan, don't they? I mean, they really do. Without Satan, they have no God. Without Satan, they have nothing that would employ the kind of fear and loathing and terror that Christian nutcases have of Satan to motivate them. This is the whole thing from the MAGA movement is fear and loathing and being scared shitless that the demons are going to come running down the street, and they may look like Haitians, but they're not. They're demons out of hell, loose by Kamala Harris. I mean, how twisted and mentally insane, if that's not redundant, do the messages have to get from Trump and these Christian fascists? How crazy does it have to get before people, even Republicans, open their ears to this and go, what the fuck is going on? This is not Reaganism. This is not what George Bush talked about. And then right after Trump's pet ape gave his little speech, there was a presentation detailing how Christians who have given up every ounce of their own inherent, if they have any, decency and belief in the truth and honor, how they now believe Trump's lies about election fraud, and how they can become paid election workers to prevent election fraud, which means to perpetrate it. A guy named Joshua Standifer, who is a founder of a real fucked organization called the Lion of Judah, said that participants, these paid election workers paid for by the MAGA movement and this Christian fascist movement, how they can, quote, monitor polling stations for suspicious activity. And when they kick all the volunteers out, you can be on the inside making a difference. This is our Trojan horse strategy. Wow. Now, I think at this point you have figured this out. It goes without saying that the so-called Courage Tour is actually a very powerful Christian Nazi ideology that works hand in hand with the Orange Monster. And during this so-called Courage Tour, this crazy fucker Wallnau and other speakers, and there were a lot of them, all claiming to be Christians and pastors and reverends and speaking for God and Christ Jesus, Lord Donald Trump and all that shit. They use terms to describe themselves and their religious movement as being evangelical, Pentecostal, charismatic, revivalist, prophetic. And one term that is never used is New Apostolic Reformation, the NAR. Now, I've talked about this before. Matter of fact, I talked about it over the weekend. According to a senior scholar at the Institute for Christian, Islamic, and Jewish Studies, a guy named Matthew Taylor, who's an expert on NAR, this movement was founded back in the 1990s by a guy named Peter Wagner, who was another Christian nutfuck. Importantly, the NAR is not a denomination. It does not have the formal organization and hierarchy as Christianity or some of these evangelical bullshit organizations. According to Matthew Taylor, quote, the New Apostolic Reformation is built around networks. They are peer-to-peer networks of leaders who identify as apostles and prophets, and who also understand themselves to be generals of spiritual warfare, whose mandate from God is to lead the church into victory over the forces of Satan. End quote. Let me put it not in the words of the senior scholar at the Institute of Islamic, Christian, and Jewish Studies, Matthew Taylor. I'll put it in my own words. These people are fucking crazy. I mean, literally, definitively crazy. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.